So I want to start off by saying welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, welcome. If you're a fanatic of everything entertainment, then this is the channel for you. But in today's movie review, I'll be talking about 1955's Godzilla Raids Again. So let's get into it. So before I get into this, I want to mention that I did watch the re-edited English dub of this film titled Gigantis, the Fire Monster, released in 1959, I believe. The reason why I watched this version is because this is the only version available on Roku and Tubi, so I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll watch it. But anyways, with that being said, let's get into the positives with this film. One of my favorite things about this film is the fact that we finally get to see Godzilla face off against another kaiju. This is the first time it's ever happened, and I'm glad that they went with Anguirus. I think that's how you pronounce it. If not, let me know in the comments. Because I honestly really like the design of this creature. I like that it's basically just another prehistoric monster brought back to life. And speaking of Godzilla having an opponent, the fight scenes are really cheesy, but I don't mind them. I absolutely love them in this film. But I know it does get a bit worse in future films, so I don't know if I'm looking forward to that. But I will say, I enjoy all the fight scenes regardless if they're cheesy or not. I like that this film has just as much destruction as the first film, and I think the use of miniatures improved quite a bit within the year it took to make this film. The miniatures look more convincing than they did in the previous film, and there are scenes in here in which buildings and airplanes blow up and explode, and I think it looks great for 1955. Also, it's great that we have a familiar face in the form of Dr. Yamane, but unfortunately, he's only in this film for like one scene for not even 3 to 5 minutes, so that sucks, but regardless, I'm glad that we got to see a familiar face. The fact that this film is only 80 minutes, that means that the pacing is great. It's perfect for a less than stellar sequel to an iconic film. The ending is something that's quite unique in a kaiju film, or at least ones that I've seen thus far. Even though the effects are primitive, the idea of trapping a kaiju monster or Godzilla with an avalanche is a brilliant idea, and I love that ending because of it. And last but not least, I like the score provided for this film, and while it's nowhere near as iconic as the first film, at least they used some variety in this film. That was one of my major complaints, or at least it was in the mix section of that review, because they used like the main theme like 5 to 6 times throughout the film, and there wasn't that much of a variety in music, especially when Godzilla was going on a rampage, and thankfully this film has variety with the score. But with that being said, let's get into the mix section with this film. Now, I don't know if it's because of the version that I watched, but like 30 or 40% of this film is narration. And while it is in the mix section for a reason, because it does feel necessary with, where the film goes and, how the plot moves forward, I found it a bit annoying after a while. And like I said, the reason why I'm putting the mix is because it felt necessary, but it did get old after a while. Once again, I'm mixed on the design of Godzilla, and I will admit most scenes utilize the suit well, but this is another 1950s man-in-a-suit kaiju monster, and a lot of the close-ups don't do it justice, and honestly are a bit more goofy than that of the first film. Just like in the first film, I failed to really connect with any of these characters. They try their damnedest with the love interest in here. It's honestly a bit too cutesy for me, which may be because of the script, or it might be because of the American actors in their dubs. I'm not entirely sure. But either way, I'm not entirely complaining because most of the performances are at least decent to pretty good. Another thing I'm mixed on, and that's because of the version I watched, is that the American actors that they used in the dub don't really quite mesh well with certain characters that they portray. Whether it's the lines themselves, or they're just either underperforming or overperforming, being a bit over the top. But in that case, over the top acting does work in this type of film. While I do like the action scenes involving just the humans, I don't like that we take a detour to focus on convicts being transported. And then we see them escape, and then a chase ensues, and it just sort of felt really unnecessary, but either way, I was a fan of the action, so I'm not entirely complaining. It's just the fact that, you could have just cut another 4 or 5 minutes out with those characters, and the runtime would have been a lot better. Regardless, still a great runtime and great pacing. It's just that itsy bitsy scene, not a fan of it. Also, side note, don't you think it'd be pretty smart to put handcuffs on prisoners if you're transporting them? While I do like the ending to this film, I'm not a fan that Godzilla kills Anguirus halfway into the film. Both me and my wife thought that that would have been the perfect ending, and I thought the movie was ending, but I saw we had like another 35 minutes left, and I'm like, oh, okay. And last but not least, I like that they add more noises to Godzilla's growls and roars and stuff. But the one that they use the most in here gets quite annoying after a while. You know, it's not. He uses the iconic roar like once or twice, but then they add this another effect on top of it that just doesn't really suit well, especially like after they use it the fourth or fifth time. And there's like times where they use it like 2 or 3 times in a row within like 10 seconds, and I'm like, no, this ain't it. Stop, please. But I do like that they changed things up a bit. You know, I have to give respect to that. But with that being said, let's move on to the negatives with this film. Now, I don't know if it's the source material or the camera negative, but there is a lot of scenes where you can't see a damn thing. And you can't really tell what's going on. The scenes are so dark, it's hard to make out what's happening, and it sort of takes you out of the film for a bit. My last negative has to be with the character of Kobayashi. His character just seems way too over the top in this film, and he seems he'd be a better fit in a Three Stooges skit than a Godzilla film. The performance of both actors, you know, with the original actor and the American dub, their performances just really grind my gear. It was just too much for me. I don't know if he's a beloved character or not, but he does redeem himself in the ending. Okay, I will give him that. We see him talk about the love of his life with one of the main characters, and we see him more or less sacrifice himself for the better good at the end of this film. And I sort of did feel bad when we saw that he left behind his girl. You know, like it sort of pulled at your heartstrings just for a split second, but then you think about the performances and you're like, I don't feel entirely bad. Mainly because we didn't get to see what the chemistry was like with the girl that was portrayed in the picture. Like, we don't know if their chemistry was great. We don't know if like they actually cast that girl in deleted scene or whatever, but we didn't get to really latch on to that. So like I said, you didn't fully feel bad about it. But with that being said, I'm going to be giving Godzilla Raids Again an overall grade of a 67%. Now, I have seen a lot of people put this towards the bottom of their rankings. I don't know if that's going to be the case with me. I've seen 5 Godzilla films so far. And this is like, so far it's the second worst, but it's not bad. Like, it's mostly more positive than it is negative, even though I do have quite a few negatives and, mixed aspects with it, but I don't think it's nowhere near as bad as people say it is. I think it had that issue of like following up an iconic film, and I think that's where a lot of people were like, yep, this just doesn't do it for me. But regardless, I just want to say thank you for everything that you do, and I hope to see you in the next video.